Hey guys, today I wanted to show you an issue I have with my Digitakt, a way that I think might fix it, but may not, and I also want to show you a disassembly of it. So to start out, I just want to go ahead and show you the issue. Here's my 9 button, so let's see if I can get it to focus. If you can see that, it sticks a little. And it's not the only key that does it. A few of the other keys do it. And it's quite loud, so let's get started. So the first thing that you're going to have to do is disassemble the unit, and to do so is pretty simple. You just have to go ahead and remove all the screws on the unit. And it's a torque head or and a hex head, so just remove them, and then the unit will lift up. It'll come up. There will be a ribbon cable, which I've already disconnected. You can just pull those up. Just be really careful about removing those. And then just lift the unit up and then take it off. And then you can flip it over. And you can see here, there's some screws on the bottom there. And I'm going to go ahead and take all of those out, and then I'll be back. Alright, after you get the back screws off, you'll also want to take the encoder knobs off. I ended up taking the encoder knobs off first, which is probably the best bet. I just forgot to put that in. And then the front panel just lifts off like this. And now the issue that I noticed that was happening is the keys actually kind of are off-centered to the faceplate, so they kind of catch on the sides. So it's just ever so slightly much that it makes it catch some of the keys worse than others. So one of the solutions I'll show you here in a minute. Alright. Okay, so what I figured out with the help of my roommate was to cut out some cardstock, and these are going to be used as spacers to make sure that the actual keys or keycaps line up properly with the metal faceplate. So in order to do that, take the keys that were sticking, 9 in my case, 16 and 3 were definitely sticking, and 11 as well. Just cut them long enough so they can touch the PCB and be easily removable. And then we're going to go ahead and put them through to shim the sides to make sure that there's even spacing. So let's go ahead and do that. Should be pretty simple, straightforward. Cardstock seems to work just fine. Do this with 16 as well. Just make sure it's fairly thick. Well, not too thick, but thick enough so it won't pop out. Alright, and then 3. Also have some tweezers here so you can pull them out in case they get lost in there. Alright, so squeeze it together and then flip it over, and then you're going to want to put the screws back in and then screw them in, but not too tight yet. Just enough so we can get enough screw in there to hold it to the front panel. Like so. We'll just do the bottom ones first. We won't do the top ones yet. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at it. It's still shimmed pretty well. Make sure it's all good. A few of them fell out there on the 9, but it stayed together fairly good, so we'll go ahead and shim some more in there. Yeah, they dropped through right on that side, so it's not a big deal. Okay. So now that they're shimmed like that, we're going to want to go ahead and tighten the bottom screws here. Just go ahead and tighten them. They were pretty tight from the factory, so make sure that they're nice and tight. Not too tight though, because you can risk breaking the PCB. Alright, let's go ahead and take out the actual cards now that those are tightened. And let's give it a try. And it seems that it has actually fixed the issue. Yep, looks good. So now in this case, what we're going to do is, now that that's all tightened on the bottom, we're going to go ahead and do the rest of the screws. And then I'll be back when it's all reassembled, and we'll go actually over what is inside this unit. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside the unit. So there's a few interesting things we'll take a look at. Right here is a Freescale semiconductor CPU. It's a cold fire CPU. And the interesting thing about the cold fire CPU, it's based around the Motorola 68K processor, so it's actually a fairly old architecture dating back to the 80s. It's been updated. It runs at a much higher clock rate than the original does. It's not particularly powerful, but for this application it works just fine. Right here we have a Toshiba flash unit. I think it's a custom part. It doesn't have a direct data sheet, but it looks like it's actually a 4 gigabyte, not gigabit. It's actually a 4 gigabyte module that they're only using 1 gigabyte from for the actual storage. Over here is a Spansion module, which is actually just a fairly small flash RAM, or flash module. It's probably 256 megabits, so 64 megabytes. I guess I could look at the model number. I think that's what it was when I looked it up before. It's not very big, but that probably holds the firmware, holds the base operating system and everything. Then over here you have the working RAM. The easy way to tell that, there's some serpentine traces that go to it. They're impedance matched so that the lengths are, the same length going to the CPU. So that's how you can tell that's RAM. It's probably DDR2. The interesting thing is right here, this is a super cap, and you usually don't see these in this kind of gear. And the only thing I can think of, the reason it being there, is I'm assuming that once you turn off the power to the unit, that anything that was in working RAM or any parameter changes will be flushed to the flash module. And they're probably doing that to save on write endurance. Over here, this is going to be a DC to DC converter. It's really simple to tell that it is. I mean, I'm guessing that's the the actual controller for that. You got some switching circuitry over here, and then you have the power rails. You can easily tell on the board because there's large power rails going across here, and they're marked with the voltages. So you have your CMOS voltage, which is 3.3 volts. You have TTL voltage, which is interesting. There's probably TTL logic in here. I'm guessing the opto coupler over here, which we'll get to in a minute, is TTL based. You have plus 12, minus 12. You have 0 volt. I'm wondering why they're doing a 0 volt for that, unless they're using that as ground reference or something like that. It's kind of interesting. This white thing over here, I can almost guarantee that that's an opto isolator because of its location and that it's a white package. I've seen a lot of opto isolators in a package exactly like that. And it's by the MIDI, so the MIDI standard dictates that the inputs and outputs are opto isolated, so that's what that's going to be doing. And past that, I mean, the soldering quality is fantastic. Other than the switch issue that we took care of in the beginning there, it's a pretty well made unit. The connectors here to connect the ribbon cables are kind of interesting. Not a lot of pins, so I'm guessing they're multiplexed. There was actually quite a few multiplexers on that board, but the OLED screen is probably serially driven too, and there's probably a microcontroller under it that multiplexes the data going to it or does some kind of serial communication to basically control the OLED module. There's a little chip here. Let me take a look if I can actually see what that is. It looks like I'm gonna guess that that is a USB controller, just because of its physical location. And that's about it. I hope this was informative and you can see what's inside the unit.